Jerry, for crying out loud, that little boy is your son. It's been 4 months since his birth and you haven't as much as glanced at him? Jerry looked like he had just woken up from a nightmare. His eyes were red and puffy, and his teeth were clenched so tight they looked like he was fighting not to cry. But in reality, he was grieving. He was grieving the death of his wife. She had died while giving birth to their first child. Since her death, he had not been the same. He shut himself away, avoided family, and took up smoking and drinking, and not being the kind of man he used to be. Jerry stared at his mother. Why should I care what happens to him? He's the reason my wife is no longer here. That child is a murderer. Oh my God, Jerry. Why did it have to be? He choked on the tears that began to flow from his eyes. Why did he have to kill her? Why did he have to hurt my wife? My only. Jerry collapsed to the floor, sobbing. His body shook with sobs as he fell to the floor. His mother rushed to his side. She knelt down and put her arms around him. Oh, Jerry, how could you even think of such a thing? She told him, her voice breaking as she cried. That child is no murderer. I bet if he had a choice, he wouldn't have wanted his mother to die while giving birth to him. That's a pretty horrible way to die. She had been trying to get him to understand his son was nothing but a sweet and caring little boy. As Jerry lay on the floor sobbing, she held him close to her. She rubbed his back soothingly, trying to make him feel better. Jerry stared into his mother's eyes. They were so kind. Mom, I don't think I can bear to look at him. You'll change your thoughts if you were to see him. He's a splitting image of her. He is beautiful, happy, and healthy. His black curly hair is as dark as hers was, and when I got him, his eyes were just like his mother's. He stroked his back in a gentle manner. I know you don't think so now, but you just haven't had time to see him in such a way. I want you to open your mind and see him for who he is, she said. She bent down and pulled Jerry's head. She bent down and pulled Jerry's head into her chest. Jerry cradled his head into her bosom. He cried with his mother, and his mother cried with her son. He lay there on the floor, in her arms, the pain that he had been carrying with him for so long finally letting him go. The feelings of grief and guilt dissipating, replaced with love and happiness. She stood up and pulled him to his feet. She smiled and gave him a kiss on his forehead. Let's go see the gift our Louis left us. When she put it like that, it was impossible for Jerry not to agree to it. He followed behind her as she led him to the baby's room. Inside was a crib with a brand new little boy sleeping soundly in it. She smiled at him as she gently nudged him forward. Come here, Jerry, she said. He went to the crib and looked down at the baby. Jerry stared at the little boy. He had Louis's face. He was sleeping peacefully with a smile on his little face. The sleeping boy stared as if he sensed his father's presence and opened his beautiful brown eyes. Jerry watched as the baby's mouth stretched open in a sleepy smile. Jerry slowly walked forward. He reached out his hand. The baby looked up at him and smiled. Jerry's heart melted at the sight. He was dimly aware of his mother watching him from across the room, saying nothing. As he continued to watch the baby, his mind began to clear of the heaviness of its past. I was wrong, Mom, he whispered. He watched the baby, his eyes and his mind at peace, finally at rest. Jerry looked up to see his mother standing in the doorway. She came to him, held him, smiled, and hugged him tight. She whispered in his ear, "That's your boy. That's your boy. That's our son." She ran her hand up and down his back. "He's perfect and he loves you. You can tell by the smile on his face." They all spent the rest of the evening together. "Mom, we have to do something about this. His powers are too strong for his age, and he has zero idea on how to control it," Jerry said to his mother, panic-stricken. "That is what we are here for. Train him and teach him how to control his powers." "Those two are your responsibility," Beryl said coldly. "He can't handle all that rigorous training. He's only 5. How do you expect him to learn to control his powers?" "What if he runs into trouble?" Jerry said, getting angrier as his mother wasn't even listening to him. "I thought this was going to end with me. Why did it have to extend to him as well?" "You worry too much. You do know there is a prophecy on his head," Beryl said. "I know that. But aren't they supposed to manifest sometime in the future when he's older or something?" "Well, it's not the same with every—" "I don't get how you are so calm about this. This is America, Mom. They will put him under various machines and stick needles into him trying to find his bloodline," Jerry said. "I know that, but I won't allow the government to do anything to my grandson." "Yes, that is why we are going to perform the sacrifice of blood to keep his powers locked up." "What?" Beryl said, horrified. "I know it's morbid, but there is no other way. What if his powers never return? That's better. I won't have to worry about him hurting people, well, anyone. But if he wants his powers, he must go through all the troubles of attaining them. Where are his rings and stuff?" The Lagos market was as busy as it was every other day. The cacophony of voices from the stalls was as loud as ever. The rustle of people from the market and the crowd was just as dense. The cars and buses were as noisy and as crass as they had been every other day. The voices of traders calling to their customers were just as forceful as every other day. The sounds of traffic at peak hours were just as shrill as ever. The bustle of noise and movement was as pronounced as ever. At a shed not too far from the road, a lady was trying to get her 5-year-old to eat, but she would rather jump around in happiness. "Temitope, eat this food before it gets cold," she said, trying to get her to stay calm. Wanted to just wriggle and dance the whole day. "Mommy, I'm coming," she said as she ran out of the shed. She ran to an Okada that was stopped at the side of the road. "Uncle Lawson, are we come to buy kai kai again?" she asked in her childish voice, blinking ever so cutely. The Okada man just smiled at her. He alighted from the motorcycle and headed for the shop. He limped while holding little Temitope. "Iya Temitope," he greeted, bowing slightly. "Lawson, báwo "Ah, Adupe ma. This your leg, is it still giving you issues?" "Yes, so the pain has increased in the last 2 days. Has it become unbearable?" "Yes, ma." While the two adults chatted, Temitope stood, staring at Lawson's injured legs. She walked over to him and touched it before returning back to eat her food. "I'll be on my way, ma," he said and stood up. He only realized he wasn't limping anymore when Iya Temitope drew his attention to it. "Ah, Lawson, you're walking well now. Isn't it painful anymore?" He was beyond shocked. How did this happen? He had no answer to it. "Emini," the little girl said, but only to the hearing of her mother. This wasn't possible. It was too early. She was too young. Her powers should not be manifesting now. Pops, you're sure you're gonna be okay? I can stay back if you want me to. I still got many more weekends to go spend with Grandma, Caleb said. Your grandma will not let me hear the end of it. Oh, Jerry, you no longer want me to see my grandson. Jerry laughed. I'll be fine, son. You can go. He was still a bit skeptical. Dad, you really don't look so well. You've got dark circles under your eyes. You're shivering a lot too. Thanks, son, but it's the damn stress. I'm sure I'll be fine after a good sleep. Don't worry, I'll call you if I need anything. Okay, see you Sunday. Jerry watched as his son got into the Porsche and drove off. A small smile played on his face. The boy really took after his mother. Aside from the physical features, he also got her kind heart and free-spirited soul. He ran his fingers through his long grey beard and took a long, deep breath. He felt it to be a sign of strength. He walked slowly into his living room and looked around. He always enjoyed the relaxing sensation of taking a siesta after the weekends. He sat on the couch, and just as he placed his back to it, he winced in pain. "Shit!" he exclaimed and quickly stood up. He went up to his room and took off his shirt. He turned and looked at his back in the mirror. That darn witcher's cane. His back was in a bad shape. There were cane marks going all over it and they had gotten infected. There were also new and tiny cuts in different places. Ugh, he said with disappointment. He carefully put the shirt back on and proceeded to go back to the living room when he noticed the glowing red light on his wardrobe. He shook his head and rolled his eyes. This was actually the reason he had agreed for Caleb to go spend the weekend at his grandmother's. The council had been summoning him for the last week, and he knew why, but he still ignored their summon, and they sent the witcher's cane to him. Caleb was turning 18 in a few days, and as per the norm, he was supposed to transform into his wolf form and hunt down the pack of rogue wolves which was plaguing the area. However, they had no idea that he had cast the binder spell on Caleb and locked his powers and his wolf self away. They didn't know there might be no cure for the spell, and Caleb might need to fight his entire life to regain his powers. He was going to answer their summon and let them know the truth so they would leave him and his son alone. He opened the wardrobe and fumbled inside. He found the ring that was glowing. Taking it out, he made a small cut on his thumb and let the blood fall on the ring. It flickered a bit and then let out a beautiful blue flame. The flame morphed into a door and he went through it. He found himself in the midst of 7 fierce-looking wolves, their eyes large and yellow, their piercing, and they lunged at him. Without thinking, he swung his arm around and caught a wolf by its neck. It was a male and it growled weakly. He released it and threw it into the air. He caught the next wolf easily, and then, just as he expected, the other wolves followed suit. The wolves circled around him and almost encircled him. Jerry just stood there and did nothing. Really? Do we have to do this every time I appear? He said with an eye roll. I have wounds to tend to, so I'd appreciate it if we get things over with and fast. The wolves gave a respectful bow, and one by one they transformed into men. Hello, dears, he said to them. We aren't dears, one of them said. Marcus, it's good to see you too. Your Majesty. An angry growl escaped Jerry's mouth. He didn't want to be addressed like a lowly lord. I would prefer to be addressed by my name and not as your king, Lance. I'm so sorry. There is no need to apologize, another one said. After all, it's been a long time since we saw him. We probably don't even remember his name. Theo, the clown among them, said. Can we get to the point? Why have you been ignoring our summons? It was Marcus again. Because I have nothing to say to you. You have a lot to say, Your Maj. Jerry, we have to talk about Caleb. He'll be turning 18 in a few days, and that's his coming of age. He needs to be trained for there won't be any training, Jerry interrupted Lance. What do you mean by that? Salvador asked. Have you forgotten about the prophecy? I haven't, Jerry stated flatly. So, let us know what you mean then, Marcus asked. I performed the ceremony of blood on him. The shock and surprise of his statement was like a punch to the gut. You what? You can't just do that, Salvador said with an angry tone. Why not? Jerry asked, the exasperation clear in his voice. He's my son, and he's the savior of our clan, of our race in general. Do you not care if we die? Do you not remember what we had to go through with Zephyr? Zephyr is bloody dead, Jerry said. Salvador's hand flew to his face and he let out a long sigh. You say that like it makes a difference. I know Zephyr is dead. But just like Caleb is a descendant of King Timandros, Zephyr might also have one too. Till his death, Zephyr never stopped looking for the staff. His descendants might be too. He's the only family I have left. And I am not willing to risk his life just so we can survive. But guess what? He will lose his life anyway if he doesn't take his position. Jerry was still adamant. When his father or him wasn't born with the king's ring and staff, he had thought it had left his bloodline and he wasn't going to have to deal with all this. But Caleb had been born with it and he had to fulfill the prophecy, and that meant all he had were strangers surrounding him that he wasn't ready to deal with. You know what, Jerry? I just remembered what you told me the day you learned of your history. You vowed to get revenge for the way your grandfather died. Isn't this the perfect opportunity? That is, if you're willing to go through with it. He needs to be trained, Jerry said. So, we will teach him. He needs to learn what the hell he's dealing with. Jerry sighed. Training was going to be really hard, especially now that his power link had been severed. But he didn't have much of a choice. Give me time. Let me talk to him and get him to accept all of this. This isn't something you just walk up to a young child and say,